Welcome to the show. As the world races to feed its 7 billion inhabitants, the solution of food factories is now creating bigger problems. In the U.S., states like Iowa and Minnesota, millions of pigs are being crammed into overcrowded barns, being fattened for slaughter while breeding superbugs. Iowa's factory farms also produce well over 5 billion gallons of liquid manure a year. Most of this waste is being injected directly into the drought-stricken and highly erodible soil. But the ground simply can't hold all the nitrates and bacteria, so it ends up in the rivers. Correspondent Mike Kirsch tells us why there is no easy solution to this pig problem.
Across the Midwest in the United States is a landscape of rural farming communities where families have been raising hogs, in many cases for more than a century. It's where much of the world's pork comes from. Almost 5 billion pounds exported abroad to Asia and Europe last year alone, about $6 billion worth. Swine from South Dakota, Minnesota, Indiana, and Iowa, among other states, are trucked to meat processing plants like this one in Austin, Minnesota, run by Hormel, one of the nation's largest. Just down the street from Hormel is the Spam Museum, where visitors learn about the many pressed pork Spam products canned and marketed to consumers around the world. America's own history with Spam, how it was supplied as army rations to U.S. troops during World War II, on display in old marketing films.
It was the Emperor Napoleon who first said that an army marches on its stomach. Good provisions are still essential to morale, and when our troops go into battle, they can rightly consider themselves the best-fed army in the world.
The Hormel girls said to capture the pride felt by the hog industry back then. Pride that hog farmers in this part of the country say remains today. Like in the hog-producing community of Jackson, Minnesota, where just about everybody who lives here in this rural town of 5,000 is either farming pigs or knows someone in the family who does. And where just about everybody in town has been to Cat's Hog Heaven to wolf down the many fresh pork dishes on the menu here.
So we're kind of partial to the pork.
The restaurant owners are Kat and Bill Steffen. Bill's a former hog farmer himself from Indiana.
In Indiana, not far from where James Dean was born. Not familiar with what all he did with hogs, but here's a picture of him. And that's all I've done my whole life, is work with hogs until we've done this restaurant.
What is this?
This is pig's ear and pig's ear coleslaw sandwich.
Today, Bill sits down to lunch with two of Jackson's most prominent residents, Brad and Meg Frecking, among America's most successful and wealthiest pork producers. Theirs is a rags to riches story of two kids from struggling pig farming families in Jackson who fell in love young, graduated college, and got married, slowly building a pork-producing empire as the owners and operators of one of America's top pork-producing companies that produces 1.2 million pigs across 4 different states with annual worldwide sales of $250 million. Naming their company New Fashion Pork, rather than naming it after the Frecking family name.
Normally, a lot of pig companies in the U.S. are named after their owner, Mike. Well, you know my last name, Frecking. Well, that gets slaughtered. Very few people can pronounce that.
Brad Frecking agreed to take CCTV behind the scenes of his hog farm operation at a time when the pork industry's image is just now recovering from the devastating impact to sales suffered during the H1N1 swine flu pandemic back in 2009.
H1N1, which the mass media labeled swine flu. Our export sales plummeted, our price of pork plummeted.
And presently, Frecking says the pork industry is suffering from another virus outbreak, though one non-threatening or contagious to humans, called the PED or PED virus, that's claimed the lives of 3 million piglets in 25 U.S. states.
The PED porcine epidemic diarrhea. It's a coronavirus. There is no crossover to humans. It's not contagious to humans or anything like that. It is introduced a year ago into the U.S. and it causes a massive diarrhea in the newborn pigs, and they basically dehydrate and die. And looking at the most recent stats, over 50% of the U.S. sow herd has been infected with this. So pork supply is shrinking, and it's going to continue to shrink through the fall. It's going to decrease U.S. pork supply. I mean, there's no doubt about that. It's already doing it, and the response to that is prices are rising.
Frecking says a number of his own newborn pigs have contracted the PED virus, despite the strict sanitation measures he has in place for any person entering his hog facilities, among them showering and stepping into this virus-killing powder.
The powder is a desiccant, so if you have a virus or bacteria on your foot tracking into the barn, it'll kill it. It'll just dehydrate it, immediately desiccate it. So with viruses, you know, human traffic is one of our biggest issues that we deal with on trying to keep disease out of the pigs. So anything we can do to decrease that risk, we incorporate.
As farmers in the pork industry battle to keep their animals healthy inside these confinements, critics of the pork industry say a greater concern should be the health of people living nearby outside these confinements. Citizens in rural farm country who environmentalists say are routinely exposed to toxic levels of pig manure gases like hydrogen sulfide and ammonia. And citizens who in larger urban areas like in Iowa's state capital Des Moines are reportedly exposed to high levels of pollutants in the water supply, from which some get their drinking water. That environmentalists blame in no small part on the pig manure and urine that falls down through ground slats into Olympic pool-sized holding tanks underneath these confinements, or seen stored in outdoor waste lagoons like these. Pig waste then is pumped out onto nearby fields to fertilize corn and soybean crops that are grown to feed the pigs. Toxins that ultimately run off into nearby streams and rivers. Scientists at the Des Moines Water Works say ammonia levels from pig manure in Iowa's two main rivers, the Raccoon and Des Moines River, where 1 in 6 Iowans get their drinking water, has become a major health issue this spring. And just last summer, nitrate levels alone from chemical fertilizers in the Raccoon River, they say, reached 240% of the level allowed under federal law under the Clean Water Act. Parents of infant children were warned not to let their children drink tap water because excess nitrate could ultimately cut off the blood oxygen supply to their brains. Among residents concerned about water pollution are these two men seen throwing back the fish they caught in the Des Moines River less than a mile from Iowa's state capitol building.
A lot of fish we catch out of here are very sickly looking, and they just look like they're polluted, honestly. A lot of fertilizer has been flushed into our rivers.
The pond by my house, you can just smell manure everywhere. Like, you can actually, if you catch a fish, sometimes you can smell the manure on the fish. Very polluted.
And 200 miles north of Des Moines, an environmental study showed that students at the K-12 North Winneshiek School, that's just downwind from this hog confinement, reported higher numbers of asthma cases than normal after the confinement was built back in 1995, prompting a group of local citizens and environmentalists to file a lawsuit against the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in hopes of forcing the federal government to clean up the air emissions from these facilities that are called concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs, says the group's lawyer, Wally Taylor.
Studies after studies after studies, which is the basis for our lawsuit, have shown that there are health impacts from CAFOs.
Sam Zook, who grew up attending the school and says he suffers from asthma, is one of the plaintiffs.
And I've grown up amidst the agriculture. When I was little, I wanted to be a farmer. I still do, just maybe not a conventional farmer right now. It's a way of life. Farming's a way of life around here, but unfortunately it has a lot of environmental degradation with the current practices. and they need to be regulated, or we need to change the system.
Yes.
Local environmentalist Bob Watson offers a rather blunt message to Asian and European consumers of U.S. pork.
They get the meat, and we're the toilet. So we are left with the water pollution, the air pollution, the health effects. We even have deaths from hydrogen sulfide in confinements.
Several states have reported hog farmers dying from toxic fumes inside these confinements that can house upwards of 1,500 pigs. Pigs dying as well, say environmentalists, from toxins in and around the confinements. Like these two dead hogs that were seen lying outside one such confinement several miles south of North Winnechek School, though no farmer could be located to explain what happened to them.
We get the dead pigs, we get people dying from hydrogen sulfide poisoning in confinements because we're using an industrial process instead of raising animals like we have for the last thousands of years.
Watson referring to farmers who raise hogs naturally, organically, on the land, rather than the mass production model practiced in the U.S.
We're advocating that we know we don't need to do agriculture like this. This is a kind of agriculture that allows corporations to get rich. I ate bacon for lunch today, but it was from a farm that raised their pigs on pasture, and it wasn't in a confinement.
However, U.S. pig farmers like Brad Frecking say today the world demand for pork simply makes it impossible to raise pigs in smaller numbers freely with less toxic waste, as, for example, organic pork producers are able to do with fewer pigs feeding off grass around the world. That there is simply no other way to dispose of the mass quantity of animal waste than the current methods or technology used by which pig manure is collected and used as fertilizer. Fertilizer that farmers like Frecking refer to as the all-important nutrient they say enables them to produce enough corn to feed millions of hogs annually. The majority of Brad Frecking's hog confinements, he says, by the way, are in the state of Iowa.
And the pigs generate manure, which is then used as a nutrient, organic fertilizer for the corn crop that goes back to feed the pigs. And that's what you see here in the Midwest. A lot of farmers just create that natural circle of producing corn to feed the pig produces the manure, which are the nutrients to grow the corn crop. And it's very successful. We've always lived in a very heavily regulated environment, Mike. That's how to operate our facilities. I mean, we're doing annual audits, random visitations to the farms. I mean, so we've grown up in an environment where we have to dot our I's and cross our T's and do things right. And that includes the proper amount of nutrients going on the farms.
He says to prevent an excess of fertilizers on his fields and possible runoff, Frecking and the farmers he works with use high-tech computers aboard their tractors that monitor how much fertilizer is applied to their fields. One of those farmers, Jeremy Michelson.
Yeah, actually the farm service agencies, the U.S. government right now has some programs out there. If a guy doesn't own this type of equipment already to spray with and to put fertilizer on, there's incentives there for people to actually buy this type of equipment so they can cut back and make sure their rates are right on the chemicals and the fertilizers. You know, it does get frustrating because I think a lot of the population, a lot of them do not understand the type of technology we're dealing with now. The type of technology that's, you know, getting that exact amount of chemical on so that we don't have runoff into the streams and different things like that.
Frecking also employs Jay Moore as his Director of Environmental Services, he says, to ensure his company's operation is following government regulations.
With the swine industry, you know, we store our manure in concrete, you know, structures that are impermeable, and then we apply them to the crops in a very environmentally sound, agronomic manner. And so to just point your finger at agriculture altogether is just incorrect, and it's not fair.
10, 12 years ago, I'd say you're a little bit not embarrassed about what you're doing, but it's like, man, we're getting beat up all the time. And when you look at a farmer, he's an environmentalist at heart. I mean, he is a land steward, and because that land, it's his 401k, it's his IRA, it's how he makes money. And why would you destroy your livelihood? The farmers are the best stewards of the land, by far and away. And sometimes you need education to help the farmers do things better. But Meg's and my position today is we're very proud of what we do, because if you think about it, it's a very noble profession. We're feeding the world. And that's what we talk to our boys about. You know, our oldest boy, Ben, is 14 years old. And we'll be proud if he wants to become involved in our family business. And we'd be very proud if all three boys, William and Thomas, would also engage in the business. Because, Mike, it's a noble profession. We're helping to feed the world in a sustainable manner.
The term feed the world is a term environmentalist Bob Watson has an issue with.
They say that they have to do this because they're feeding the world, but Iowa imports 85% of its food, and there's only 3 million people here. So if we have to import 85% of our food, then we're certainly not feeding the world. And that's just one of the arguments that the corporate ag apologists use to keep people thinking that farms are still what they thought they were in the 1950s.
Asthma sufferer Sam Zook looks at the current course of the U.S. agriculture industry, specifically hog farming and its effects on the environment, this way.
Well, if you're caring about making money from the agriculture business, you're doing fine. If you're caring about catching fish and eating it and not having detrimental side effects to yourself and breathing the air, drinking the water, living here in Iowa, then we've got a problem.
Brad Frecking says the U.S. pork industry today, while not perfect, is driven by the mass consumption of pork around the world, a demand that he has chosen to supply in what he says is the most environmentally sound way he can. His motto is that consumers always have a choice.
I'm a believer of consumer choice. If you want to be a vegetarian, great, power to you. Most of them, though, if they smell bacon, they break the bound.
Wholesome, delicious, and awesome tasting, and above all, I raise it.
We're huge believers in consumer choice. If you want to buy organic, great. If you got the money to pay for organic, that's fine. But it's a niche market, it's your choice. You know, our job is wholesome, affordably priced pork production. That's what we do. And we try to feed the globe doing that.
Though even Brad Frecking, as he makes his way around one of his facilities today, admits that the stench from raising pigs on many a day is not for the faint of heart.
Nobody's in this business for the smell of roses.
No, absolutely not, Mike. You know, the saying in the industry is it's smell of money. Well, that's okay to the point, as long as you're not disturbing your neighbors.
Because of lack of funds, Iowa's Department of Natural Resources cut the number of inspectors by 60% since 2007, creating a bigger problem to control the amount of waste that ends up in the rivers.
Coming up.
Why the White House is not getting enough support for immigration reform.
We have reports on the right and on the left showing the important and positive impact of immigration reform in the nation. We need to stop playing political games, especially the Republicans in the House.
America's Next.